Welcome to Radically Relevant Sales Conversations, where we are discussing what is influencing current B2B sales. My name is Cynthia Zenti. I am the founder of Integrated Selling, where we help socially conscious companies sell more with ease on repeat. And today, I'm so excited to be joined by Nick Thickett. I met Nick some time ago here in the LinkedIn streets, and I continue to be absolutely in awe of his generous spirit and his insight on social selling. So thank you, Nick, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And also, you know what? I'm a big fan of your show, the B2B Power Hour. And for all of you, if you have not caught the B2B Power Hour, I highly recommend it. It's a weekly live LinkedIn series.
Thank you. I appreciate
Um,
that.
oh, yeah, no, my pleasure. So today, what we're going to be discussing, and I'm going to get you to introduce yourself in just a minute, but today, what we're going to be discussing is something I don't see a lot of discussion around, and that is the concept of focusing on pain as compared to maybe using thought leadership when it comes to new client acquisition or new prospect acquisition or maintaining current customers. So I want to dive into that. But first of all, if you could just take a moment, Nick, to share a little bit about yourself, who you help, and where people can find you.
Sure. Uh, I'll do a little bit different intro than I normally do for everybody that's new. I used to love cold calling, and I used to go and wear my burnout as a badge of honor until it earned me an all inclusive 30-day visit in the hospital. And I had to really rethink why I sold and why I work the way I do. And in that process, I realized that in sales, we work too hard. We track the wrong things, and we add a lot of extra steps that don't need to be there. And while I was sitting there healing, I realized that buyers' preferences have changed and the way that we buy things has changed. And so, why is it the way we sell? And like I talk to a lot of directors of sales, and they teach their teams to sell in a way that they would never buy. And so, I collaborated with Morgan Smith to go and actually just dig into this. That's all the B2B Power Hour was just customer research. And we wanted to have a show just to talk about it. And it turned into a way to give sellers a voice so they were not suffering in silence and how to sell smarter. Thank you.
I love that. You know what? You hit on so many key points there, especially about working too hard in sales, which I think is, why this conversation is particularly relevant because if there is different ways to sell better, more effectively, and maybe that is by focusing on the pain, or maybe it is by using thought leadership. Those are something that we should be discussing, not only with our teams, but even for those solopreneurs. Like, how is it you're going after customer acquisition and what is it that's working for you? I think what would be really good just to kind of lay the foundation too is if we spent a few moments, and I'm going to ask you to do the first part of that, and that is to really just maybe expand on what it means to be focusing on the pain and maybe provide an example of that if you could.
Sure. So, when I talk about focusing on the pain, one of the things I see that happens with SDRs and sales development right now is they don't understand why that list exists. They have no recollection, no rhyme or rhythm to a reason that that name is on that list. They haven't answered why them, and they really haven't answered why now. The why now is the pain, and that pain comes from insight, knowing your customer, stepping into their shoes, understanding their jobs to be done. It's hard and it's earned to have that level of knowledge. So why do we have to go and lean into that pain? Because a lot of the time you don't go to a doctor knowing what's wrong with you. You only know the symptoms. But sometimes the symptoms are good enough. And we don't
Mm.
realize how dangerous it is until we go into the doctor and they say, your blood pressure is so high that, if you wouldn't have come in like a week later, I may have never seen you at all
Wow.
because you're at such a high risk of a heart attack. But to me, that was my normal. To me, that wasn't a problem with pain because it was just my everyday. So when we lead with pain, it's with insight, it's knowing what we've done for past customers, and understanding what motivated them to change. So that way we are leading with information, not a pitch.
Okay, I love that. The doctor analogy, I think, is so appropriate too in sales, right? It's like you can't just, you have to be able to diagnose a problem to understand, is it the right thing I'm diagnosing? Like, what are all the symptoms? And I can't prescribe something if I don't know what all the symptoms are and what it is they're trying to achieve. Even if a marathon runner comes to you, or say a runner comes to you, am I going to help them try to be a marathon runner or, maybe a sprinter? You want to understand the difference, right? Based on their results. So, but you also touched on something too, which because you're using the insight, it does touch a bit on, what it means to be a thought leader. Because to me, thought leadership comes from, having the experience and having had the conversations that you recognize patterns and you've seen things repeated before, and you use that to actually create a different type of vision for customers, what they can see as being a new reality for them. Right. So it's a little bit different of a perspective. You're going to go in kind of as someone who can see them at a peer level, but not just focusing on the pain. You can lead with, okay, I see this coming based on my experience. And you may need to consider this if you want to achieve these further results.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no,
And I,
that's
and I don't usually see it until enterprise selling, really, where I see thought leadership really come through. And I don't know why. It's maybe because it's top down selling a lot of the time. And so when you're speaking to executives, they're looking at top line, bottom line, and risk management. And so you're selling them on the future. And I think this is where a lot of sellers also get the imposter syndrome kick in.
okay. Expand on that.
Well, I can't be a thought leader. I haven't done this long enough.
Oh, right.
But really, what is thought leadership? Thought leadership is just, you don't need to be 1,000 steps ahead. You could be one or two. One or two experiences put you ahead of someone that hasn't had those experiences.
And do you find that people disqualify themselves from that because they're thinking of just experience in a particular field rather than lived experience, right? I mean, when you've been around for a while, you end up having a lot of lived experience, right? And you
Hmm.
start, you rely on that experience to guide your conversations and to get people results quicker. Right. So that's the whole thing. You can shorten that time for people's results by using that leadership ability that you have. Which you're right, you see it at the enterprise level, but I think there's absolutely room for it for the solopreneurs and for the small business owners, right? To get in there and start having those conversations with their clients saying, you know what, I see all these things happening. Where do you want to be on this? But then bringing it back into the pain, because I think the pain is actually um, really good for qualifying and disqualifying the opportunities that you follow up on.
Absolutely.
Right? Like I see a lot of people spending time chasing opportunities that haven't been qualified enough, and that they get kind of caught up on the potential of it, um, you know, without really understanding what it means to their clients.
Well, we've all been in those relationships that we came in wanting to fix someone and fix and fix and fix. We try, and then we wonder why they don't let us fix them. Well, they never admitted they had a problem in the first place, nor do they ever thought that there was a problem, only you did. That's a dangerous place to try to go and inspire change.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Like, do you have an
Yeah.
example of where that maybe has come up for you?
Say a partner says that your communication is lacking, but I understand what I'm saying clearly.
Hmm.
Is the problem that I'm not communicating clearly, or is the problem that you don't understand it?
Yeah.
And so it's that mix match of expectations and that communication that happens a lot of the time. And you know what they say about assumptions, but assumptions live in sales like all too often. So there's so much that gets left unsaid with that miscommunication and that those missed expectations that kill the deal before it really ever gets started. And the biggest one is no problem with pain. They don't see it.
So, do you think people then need to spend more time doing discovery? I mean, one of the things
Oh
that I
yeah.
really focus on with my clients is discovery. Like that is the area I spend most 90% of my time on is discovery, clarification on words, meanings, assumptions, the attached thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. That is where I spend the majority of my time. Because it's right, people have different associations with words and different meanings. So if you're not getting that common ground, how do you go on to do proposal or even get key indicators that you can measure results or attach an ROI to if you don't even have an understanding of common language
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
So many
being
people
used?
skip it. They skip through discovery thinking that deals are won in the demo, that they're won in the proposal. The problem is,
Mm,
what are you proposing? And I think this is why enterprise sellers do so much better is because they're part of implementation. They have to foresee the change management required to see the full value of the product or service. Where a lot of SMB and mid market, maybe some of the mid market, they don't have to go through that. So they don't see the change management portion. They don't talk to CS on a regular basis to understand where, customer success is getting mad because they oversold or they misrepresented that one feature or made a promise they couldn't deliver on because it's not them.
I'm sorry, I'm smiling for this because I can't tell you the amount of times, having been in tech sales for years, I've gone back to engineering teams and said, "So your job now is to make my sales stuff come true." Right? I just oversold this whole network and now you need to go out and design it, right? And it's like, ooh, we got to be really careful of that. So understanding what is, I mean, it's responsibility too within the organization, right? Like you have to be able to go back with something that's true, that's actionable, and still addresses what the customer's pain points are. Oh my goodness, this is such a key area, and I love this conversation. So something else that you touched on there, and then I want to jump into something else, is also
Yeah.
when you're focusing on this, when you've done the discovery properly, you start taking up mind share with your clients,
Yeah.
right? Because once people know something, they can never unknow it. So when you can properly articulate that pain point, when you can properly demonstrate a vision, show them what's possible in the future, they can never unsee that. So now that every other person that comes along and talks to them, they're going to be comparing to what you've showed them, right? So yeah,
I will
love that.
say, I do think that one has to come before the other because
Tell me.
if you don't have a pain
Yeah.
or a pain, there's something you see, you can never set the buy-in criteria on it. You might sell them on a future, but how is your discovery going to go through that process? How are you going to get an internal champion if there isn't some pain or gain that they're connecting to, right? And like, what are you putting in your proposal? What's in it for the company? What's in it for them? What's in it for the customer? What is that driving factor? Because without that, that's when you get ghosted.
Yeah, and so to the point here, what you're saying, and it's one of the things that I wanted to move on to next is, today's buyers are so educated, right? They know what's going on. Um, so I see using this concept of thought leadership or trusted advisor is a way to start conversations. But you still have to go back and do the basics. You still need to make sure you've got a great product, you can deliver on time, that you have great customer service, and that you can understand and overcome that pain that they have,
Hmm.
right? So in my opinion, I see it as almost two different things with different scenarios. And let me know what you think about this. But I see the thought leadership part as a way to maybe go into customers that have existing vendors, an existing solution, and as a way to maybe move them away from their existing suppliers. Whereas if you're going for net new customers, going in and focusing on that pain might be the way to go. What do you think about that?
I'm going to challenge it a little bit because I
Yeah,
find
please
when
do.
the thing I love about people that already have a vendor is they understood the problem.
Mm,
But the thing is, a lot of people buying that, it was a first time purchase. So they didn't know what the criteria was. They didn't have a process for it. And so a lot of the time they hope the technology is going to fix it for them. So what happens when you come back to go and talk to them? is, so how's that going for you? Did you get what you think? Did you get what you think you were buying? What were some of the things you thought it was going to do? And so you're not tearing it apart. You're just seeing where the gaps are, if there are any. And when you're coming from a place of trust, like you had alluded to earlier about that trusted advisor, people are open to talking to you because they know you're starting with a diagnosis, not, trying to drive to that sale. And so you can have those conversations open and honest, and they'll tell you, especially if you're not trying to rip and replace.
Yeah. Oh no, that I think that's great because, you know, I see the pain as almost being more, as you had alluded to, being more motivational. It's more tangible, right? It's something people can get their head around, and I think internally it makes for an easier. It makes for an easier internal sell,
Hmm.
right? When they can put that together, when they see their proposals come in and it's got the metrics, then they can go and get better buy-in, because we know that people are having. They're having, usually there's buying committees now, especially in enterprise sales, right? It's not just that one person. There's this buy-in that has to, go through multiple people. So understanding, what everybody's different buying criterias are and what their individual pains are,
Yeah. Could
you
you
know.
imagine if we would have had the tools we have now 10 years ago with some of the, like, think of all your stalled deals that,
What
you know,
still deals?
yeah. I'm thinking of my deals that geography got in the way. And, having being able to give them content, being able to give them access to videos and all the buyer enablement that happens now that we just never had. And I could think of a few deals, 3 in particular, that would have been, the video would have solved it because the telephone game didn't work. And when I did a closed loss interview, I actually found out the reason why they said no is because it was miscommunicated.
And time to the time delay to get the information as well, right? So yeah, I mean I will be honest, I've been in sales for a very long time. I started when I was 13 selling carpet cleaning, cold calling, right straight into the fire at 13. I thought this would be a great thing to do. All my friends are at McDonald's and things like that. I'm like, no, I'm just going to go do phone calls. Don't
Tough
ask.
place to start.
Right? But anyhow, it was a much different time. But I've seen the evolution so much. One of the things that I'm going to be talking about in a future show is this evolution of sales and how we've gone from being full service, from prospecting to being, implementation and customer service, to now it's also segregated, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think there's plus and minuses of that, but having access to get people information, um, now more than ever, it's so important because there's so many other people relying on that information. And that also is going to be part of the discovery call, as you were saying, or part of that finding the pain is who else is relying on that information, right?
Mhm.
Just speed to market and speed to get things to your customers is so, so important. um, I mean, you are just a plethora of information when it comes to, insights on social selling and the speed of trust and the speed of getting information.
Thank you. I learned that one the hard way. Well, I when I first started social selling, I treated it like cold calls. And in all fairness, it kind of was originally. Way people use LinkedIn in like 2014, it was okay to pitch somebody right
Yeah.
away. And that was kind of what people expected. But 2017 moving into 2019, everything changed. So you can't do that anymore. And people want to know you as a person before, like, rapport. I think the biggest thing that changed is that rapport used to be built in the meeting. It's one of the reasons why we used to have long meetings and take people out for a round of golf. Rapport now is built outside of the meeting, and in the meeting, it's all about your business case and getting them ahead.
Mm. Yeah, I remember working for Coca-Cola and those meetings and 150-page slide decks. Okay, I'm really happy that those days have changed. But you're right. And, the pitch slapping, as we know, is not the way to go. Taking the time to understand your customers. I mean, I'm doing your LinkedIn in 30 program, which I love. Thank you. It's been very helpful. And just getting people to actually back up a little bit and taking the time to build those relationships to really focus on, who the people, who the prospects are as people, so you can understand their pain, how it's affecting them, not only as an employee or a business leader, or a business owner, but how it's affecting them personally as well. Right. I think that's a big part that's missed in the focusing on the pain.
And even if you want, I was telling someone this the other day to try to empower them to take a different approach. I said, even if you want to be selfish and you
Mhm.
want to do it just to improve your conversions, by rushing into the meeting, you're selling yourself short. Because when you rush to go into DMs and have a private conversation, it is now one to one and you've limited your reach.
Mm,
When you do it
yes.
in the comments, you now have the ability to have oversight and you get to go and play to the algorithm and you get social proof because people will jump in and they'll dive deeper. And so what you'll have is this follower effect where we are naturally herd animals. We want to be part of a group and we want to go and, network with our peers. That's why a lot of time all people have for their LinkedIn connections is just other professionals, all their competition. So when all those people are around there, now you're getting more people that are going to reinforce that decision. They're going to ask different questions, add different angles where you never got that before. It was all based on your ability to read that person and deliver the best presentation you possibly could. Now we
Okay.
don't have to do that.
Right, but you just said something there about reading that person. And I can see that we're joined by Brenda Meller, who I know from a mastermind who actually has a book called LinkedIn, Social Media Pie. She focuses on helping people with LinkedIn as well. So hello, Brenda. Thank you
Oh,
for
cool.
joining us. Just the part that you talked on there about, the limited scope of just having those private conversations. You have to make so many assumptions, or so many assumptions are being made in direct messaging about people and their businesses. I got one this morning. It was, "Hi, Cynthia. I help coaches and consultants like you grow their business." Like me? What does that mean? Well, you're in B2B sales, right? Well, the whole world is in B2B sales. So we're going to have more specifics around that. But if that conversation had happened in comments and there was a little bit more scope and understanding and exchange, it would have been a completely different conversation.
Yeah, it would have
Because
been
you
more
can
relevant and
see,
resonant.
right? Thank you for that.
And well, think of our sales cycles too. If we go and take this approach and we're not rushing to the meeting, and I love that you brought up discovery because discovery shouldn't be starting in the first meeting. And I don't know who wrote this, put this line in the sand, but I love doing discovery in comments. And I'll add it to my CRM or I'll keep adding it to my notes because what we've noticed, and Dream Data actually has some actual data to back this up too, is that, before, if this was our sales cycle, this would be prospecting and this would be your full like in pipeline from my thumb over my hand.
Yeah.
Well, now we've switched it. This is all demand gen where people are in your content, they're in your communities, they're getting to know you. This is now the sales cycle
Yeah.
because 90% of their questions have been asked. It's like buying a suit. You don't buy the tailoring, you buy the suit, but you go to the expert to get the right tailoring done. We are now that.
So people are wanting help with implementation, right? So they come in, they know what they kind of, what they have an idea of what they might be looking for. They've seen that in just following the content, the demand gen, but they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Right? And it can be really overwhelming when there's so many choices. So going back to that discovery, some of it is actually really helping people understand the journey of implementation and what that's going to look like in their business.
I'm
And
laughing
that's
because I'm thinking of renovations. If somebody would have told me if I would have had somebody experienced that would have helped me design a few of the projects I've done on, I would have done it completely different. because I saw the future. I had that vision in my head, but I didn't know all the pains that I was going to create in the process.
Have you seen my backyard? Is that why you're saying that?
I understand your pain. I'm still working on it in here.
I live just outside of Vancouver, and it's really just moss. People are like, how's your grass? I'm like, not moss. It's just my moss. That's all it is. But you're right. You have these visions, and it's like if somebody had taken the time to actually, when I started a couple of projects, to say, these are the things you're going to run into, you're going to need to be
Yes.
prepared with.
Yes.
I would have just been like, here, take my money, because I want to know ahead of time the things that are going to prevent me from getting the outcomes that I want. So that's kind of a key point, and something that I really think that you focus on, in that I really like to help people with, is understanding what are those barriers that are preventing them from getting the outcomes, right? So that
Yeah.
can be part of the pain conversation too, or even thought leadership,
Yeah, it's almost the branch in between. Because if you
right?
sell them on the, if you understood there's a pain, there's an opportunity cost to what they're doing right now, and then you're look, this is where I know where you want to go in the future, and this is where the market's going and everything else. But have you thought about, yeah, this, and this? So maybe that's the glue.
I think so. I refer to it as like people have perceived barriers that are influenced by previous experiences on whether or
Yeah.
not they can get the outcome, right? Is it they think it's going to take too long? Is it because it's going to be too hard, too difficult? They don't know how to navigate that process. So yeah, you're right. I think there's an area in there that we can help our prospects with and our customers with, as far as going from pain to resolution.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. So that makes for good conversation. That's a whole other show.
Yeah, I'm kind of like mulling that one over, and I'm thinking even in the house, like how many times I thought something was too expensive because I thought it was easier than it actually was. But
Mm,
I only thought about one element and didn't realize there was 9 others for that whole project. So I opened up the worst surprise box ever and had to fix along the way. So what was a simple task became a didn't realize was actually a full project. And
and
so, oh, would have been so much cheaper just to get the and faster and yeah. Yeah.
well, and I mean, then that's going to influence your next buying decision. Right. The next time you go to do something, you're going to know to ask different questions. And if someone is there and they can say, okay, hear what your pain was, and this is how you can go about it quicker, faster, less time, less money. Right.
I got a
But they need
question.
to ask those questions. Sorry.
I got a question for you because somebody had brought this up the other day, and you weren't in the Monday Power Hour for us to discuss, but I thought this would be a good one for you. Somebody said, "I always get worried when buyers have questions and they give me pushback right away," and I'm like, "But that's a good thing."
I love pushback.
But
I
would you like to dive into this? Because I think this is something that
would
you,
love to. Would love
yeah,
to. So, what do they mean by pushback? First of all, this is me with the clarity thing again, right? I'm always like, well,
yeah.
what does that mean exactly? What do they mean by pushback? Did they give an example?
No, but they were a little nervous when they asked. But to me, it came across as they were challenging the project. And so what they were doing is thinking like challenger customer, they were going back and they were going through the details because they
Right.
were trying to fact check.
Yes. In my opinion, in my experience, first of all, I love when people push back, because that means they're engaged.
Yeah.
That means they've been paying attention. It's also a chance to go for alignment, to make sure that you're on the same page. It's
Mm,
also where we can make ourselves completely honest and vulnerable and transparent with our clients, because I work from the prospect, or from the position of reverse engineering. You agree on the goal of what you want that to be, and then you reverse engineer the steps to get there.
yeah.
And you get that buy-in along the way. So if somebody is saying, well, I'm not really agreeing with that, and I really don't think that's a best path forward. Okay, that's awesome. The first thing I always do, no matter if it's an objection or not, it as well, is always to agree with somebody. Because if it's coming up for them, it's real. Whether it's valid or not, it's real to them, so it's valid. So agreeing with them, you know what, that's a great point. Why don't we take a step back and just examine it to make sure we are going to be able to achieve this, but maybe we need to just kind of change the path to get there, and then we can move on to the next thing. But honestly, if you can share what's coming up for you on this, we can absolutely have conversation about it. I think it's really important for people to feel that when they're having sales conversations, it's a safe place to be open and to be honest and to be vulnerable and transparent, right? When you're doing project sales that, are mission critical, they're life saving, they're, people's futures depend on it. It doesn't matter. They're all important. Being able to really have honest conversation is so, so important. So I welcome the pushback. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, talking about reverse engineering, I have two thoughts, but the first one is reverse engineering. If the people that always say yes always come back to derail it at the end, or they have no trust in the organization, so they have nothing riding on it. That's what I found in my experience, and other people's experience may differ, but when somebody says yes too quick, I start to ask questions. Like,
Yes. No.
usually people would want to talk to me about this. Oh yeah, so maybe they're a new buyer, so maybe they have some more
No.
information.
Yes.
Yeah, but the other side is when they start asking me good questions, that's their criteria for a decision. So now I can sell a champion who then I can work with to go and empower them to sell
Mm,
in-house. And
yeah.
so what would you rather do? Run a solo mission like the comments? Would you rather rush into private and do all the heavy lifting yourself? Or would you rather find that person that, his name's on the line that wants to validate it so that they can be part of that process? I would take that every time.
There's so many layers in this because there is exactly what you're talking about, the different people involved. But, sometimes people don't know what they don't know. Right. And
Yeah.
that's where they're relying on you as maybe that trusted advisor with your experience that, hey, these are the things you actually really need to be considering. I am. I work in tech as well, where we're selling, embedded power supplies. Not everybody knows all the configurations and things that go into it. But when you've got power coming from a train and it has to power your data acquisition unit, it needs to follow a certain process. And there's certain things that need to happen in there. But if you're new and you haven't been involved in that process, you may not know, right? You may not know all the moving parts. So I think having people question you, and also you as the seller, being able to ask and clarify that people do understand and getting them to, and so this goes back to adult learning best practices actually, is having people say back to you what their understanding is.
Mm. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense because it's that clarification in their own words.
Right. And so they can go talk to other people about it from a point of being educated and convicted, rather than just repeating something. When they have real understanding of what is being communicated and what the results are, they go speak with conviction rather than just pushing along information.
But I think this is a fear-based thing. I think this
Oh,
is why it's skipped because people are worried if they throw questions out, they'll act as roadblocks, not
mm,
realizing you're setting the buying criteria and you're acting as a guide. But nobody talks about this. Nobody empowers sellers up until enterprise to take this level of like management consulting approach to sales. And so they try to like bulldoze through the process and they miss all these steps. And then that's what derails it at the final hour.
you are so speaking my language right now. And thank you for that. Like it just lights me up. You know, and tell me your thoughts on this. Is it because people, it's fear based, and is some of that because they don't really understand the outcomes, features, and benefits of their products and how they can support people? So they don't know how to match up the pain points to what it is that they can be achieved.
I think that's a part of it. And the other part of it is where are they in their quota and what type
Mm.
of culture is behind them. Because I know in my past, there were certain times I would rush to put stuff into the CRM to show activity to justify to management because management wasn't aligned with the way people buy. So they wanted everything to be faster than reality. So I think it's two
Mm.
parts. And
Yeah.
also too, how often when like people that start in a tech company, who gives you customer training? Who actually aligns the product to the person instead of, you talk to new sellers and they just pitch and pitch and pitch and pitch. And I was like, that's great. And it's kind of like that lady or the person that reached out to you. I help coaches that do this. Oh, how? And then instantly they're in a pitch, but they can't deliver real value on what it actually looks like or what got customers excited when they actually experience the product.
Mm. Yeah. That's good. So you said one thing there that I just want to celebrate. When I entered it into the CRM, so I'm just going to acknowledge you for actually entering information into CRM. I'm sorry, it's such a sales thing, isn't it? I love my CRM. I should probably use it sometime.
I think we've all been guilty of that one.
Right?
I keep
Oh my
notes
goodness.
other places, and I don't know
Oh,
how
I
many
know
times Morgan's like, so
about
yeah, I'll
that.
do it at the end of the day.
Yeah. So, but you know what? The enablement part is so important as well, right? So making sure that there's alignment so that there is a reduction of time getting people the information, but so that people know how to actually communicate what it is they're doing. Now, sales enablement is something that you actually help people with a lot. You help your companies with it a lot. Is there a trend that you see where people are needing it in certain areas more than others, or what should people focus on, companies focus on in sales enablement?
This response is going to change. It would have been different 2 months ago. I'm actually doing customer interviews right now, and I'm actually looking at enablement people, and I'm understanding who hired them, what happened, and really seeing what changed in that company's
Mhm,
mindset that the
mhm,
enablement was even needed. And then I'm also looking at how long they've been there and how their role is evolving in their day to day. And it seems like what happens is there's an explosion of like they have the sales led motion, they don't have that much marketing. And so they realize that content is a big piece of what they do. And so they're trying to eliminate the steps in between, which is funny because if you look at what the real root cause is, because they don't know how to do discovery. And so they're trying to bypass discovery with canned content and they're trying to leverage tools to do automation and they're trying to play a volume play instead of focusing making every activity count.
mm,
But like I
mm.
said, this may change after I'm done all my interviews in a month, but this is what I've seen so far.
I think you are absolutely. I think it's just going to qualify or quantify, substantiate what you're already thinking. Because we see so much rush to market to just talk at surface level rather than spending the time understanding what it really is. I learned this concept of intrinsic behaviors or intrinsic triggers, right? Um, that I don't think there's a lot of time spent on. And those are those thoughts, those emotions, and those behaviors that influence buying behaviors.
Mm.
So, it's the association we have with it. I know when I was selling fixed wireless broadband, this goes back a long time ago, I was up against the incumbents. We're in Canada. If I say, TELUS or Rogers or something like that, you understand for our audience in the US, like AT&T, Verizon, those big carriers, nobody gets in trouble. IBM, right? Nobody gets in trouble going away from Big Blue. But when you come in as somebody new in an unknown market, the fear of changing is so real, it's palpable because
Mm.
people are afraid of their jobs, how they're going to be perceived, all of those things that I don't see a lot of people still talking about that. It was big when I was, and maybe this is just me, but it was something that's always been part of my guiding principles when selling is like, what's going to happen to the people that make those decisions?
I think social fixed that because before it was the knowledge of the full customer journey that was known, where now there's transparency from social. So like
Mm.
IBM, Dell, all these people were known people in the market. Now look at Apple. Well, Apple did that with the thoroughness of their design and the level of detail in their experience. And think of their old ads, how they challenged the status quo, and look at how they've developed their experience online and in their stores. It adds that transparency, that expectation that I know what I'm going to get with Apple. I know what I'm going to get with IBM. Now, small companies with the smallest budgets can do that, but it takes a different mindset.
Mm. I love that. So I also see like the Apples and all of those as being the thought leaders. Like we see what's happening. We see those gaps in the market. We know that you want a different experience. Here's how we're going to do that for you. Ah, right? They saw something that didn't exist and just filled that need. So yeah, and for the people, and this is what I love about social, and being around people like yourself and Morgan, your show, and just some of the people that you interview, the insights that they give, it gives people such a different perspective how they can show up and do business. It's
Yeah,
incredible.
it's circumstantial. And I think that's the biggest problem with sales is everybody thinks it's rules based. There's principles. It's like science. Sales is circumstantial and it's built on a case basis which leverages pattern recognition. Me, you, and 10 other people could be lined up, and every one of us could get the same scenario, and we would all give different ways to deal with it based on our experience and our own pattern recognition. But sales tries to like indoctrinate people to follow the same process and skip steps, not realizing that we need to see failure. We need to see greatness. We need to see everything in between in order to build up that pattern. We're like, yeah, I wouldn't say that in a call. Notice how their tone dropped and how they went and did this. But how would you know that without hearing it? How would you know that without somebody explaining why it matters? I can give you scripts, I can give you frameworks, but if you don't know why it matters because of case basis, because of pattern recognition, you'll never be able to do the job smart. You'll just have to do the job fast.
Right. Ugh. I love that you talked about tone. I actually worked with a voice coach for a while, understanding. Well, and I have a nonverbal son too, right? But it was one of the having a nonverbal child is the best way to understand sales because the amount of questions and the amount of being able to take cues is absolutely incredible. But understanding the voice tone, the inflection, like speed, how people are saying things. Like there's so much richness in that. So when you're just speeding through it to get an end result, you miss the experience and understanding who people are and the richness in it, but also those key drivers.
Yeah. Yeah. So much is missed in text.
So is that then something that sales enablement should be looking at? Is slowing down the process and going deeper with their sales training? Or the
I'll give you the answer that investors want to hear.
and they
No.
give you the real answer.
But the real answer is yes, because that's the way of the future. The lowest cost to the business is to lengthen out the process to get into funnel. When you rush people into the funnel to satisfy your own metrics or vendors or investors, you're now going to have to fight in the funnel to do all the hard work where why not let them nurture? Why not let them take your content and put it in their Slack channel and send it to everyone? Why not let all that work happen naturally and organically to earn trust amongst the whole buying committee or at least a good chunk instead of having to fight for it like we used to? Like there's so much work that's created where enablement, if they just slowed down before like that pre-funnel,
Yeah.
it would SDRs would have a better life. They would get to be
We want that for
community
the SDRs. We
leaders.
want that for you SDRs. We really do.
Yeah. You have one of the hardest jobs, and those that do it well have some of the best customer insight of anyone around. When you listen to a really good experienced SDR talking on the phone, everything about what they do is calculated. None of it is by chance.
None
And
of it.
nobody, I think
None of
that
it.
cold calling is the worst place for a junior seller to start because nobody's taught them all of that. And it happens so fast that it's such an evil way to learn because you don't get to see the feedback loop. Nobody tells you why it matters. It's like a golf swing. You can't see yourself swing, so how do you coach yourself on it? All you can see is that it didn't go in the right direction.
So much there. For someone who started with cold calling, right? Like that was the first experience. The feedback, it was real, it was quick. I didn't know why it was happening, but it was just like, okay, this is it. And it was just kind of the evolution of it, right?
Yeah.
But it can be so other incredible for SDRs or so absolutely gut-wrenchingly painful that people leave sales because of their experience on the front line like that. Whereas if they had just been given a little bit more nurturing and understanding how to do it better or differently or why people are going to react the way they do, it would be a complete game changer.
Yeah. Throw them in CS for a week, throw them in marketing for a week, get them to explain why they're doing what they're doing. And
Mm-hmm.
then, get them to shadow your top sellers. Give them
Mm-hmm.
to take video recording or screenshots or screen recordings of them prospecting. Get them to manually prospect.
Yeah.
Get them to narrate what they're doing and explain why they make the choices. But none of this happens. So sellers are going with tactics. They're going with, here's the roadmap. But we all know that even Google Maps is wrong sometimes. Sometimes there's a better shortcut because of construction or so and so is doing, they're doing renovations, so they got a big bin out there, and there's just things that we know that can't be found by just running tactics.
Oh, incredible. Um, So I'm going to wrap up here. And just because I was going to go about 45 minutes, but if we're over, I could talk to you for hours because it's always so incredible. Um, Again, how can people get in touch with you? Like, do you have anything that you want to, two things, anything that you would like to just share? And then, even about this conversation or things you're offering, and then how people can get in touch with you again.
Well, as a thank you for bringing me on as a guest, anybody that reaches out to me on LinkedIn and sends me a thoughtful DM and asks for a profile review, I will do that for you for free. Happy to go and help any of you guys out.
Good.
Thank
You
you.
want to do this. They're really good.
And hopefully I can get Morgan in on, even though he's in Italy for a little bit longer. But and then check out b2bpowerhour.com. Check out the podcast interviews. Let me know what's missing.
Mm.
What is something in your career that's getting in the way of you doing good work or making you love your job? Let me know what we need to dive in, what type of guests we need to have. Let me know what's missing, or let me know what you love. That would be a huge help to me, and it would let me help you better as well.
Love that. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been my first show. You've been an amazing first guest. Thank you. And thank you for keeping me on the process. So I thank you so much. And again, make sure everybody that you are following Nick and check out that B2B Power Hour.
Thank you very
See you
much,
next time.
Cynthia. See you in the comments. Take care, everyone.